looks like when they're flying. But in theory, bees can't really see that well when they're flying because everything is going by at way faster than when they see great when they're sitting still. But when everything is moving toward them, uh, the way it is explained in the books reminds me of warp speed and the stars just being streaks of light.
So they're using their sense of smell there, right?
They know the distance, and they have great spatial orientation. So they know the distance. They have this. Their antenna detects magnetic field of the Earth from the hairs moving because of the magnetic field of the Earth. And so they have this great spatial orientation, but they don't know the exact place of where the bloom is until they smell the Nasenov pheromone. That's also what triggers the queen to go up. Queens fly low to the ground to stay out of the way of the foragers. Foragers fly 10, 15 feet off the ground, and queens fly 2 to 3 feet off the ground. And when they get past where their hive's Nasenov pheromone is, that's what stimulates them to go up.
Is the drone congregation areas are high up?
They're higher up, yeah. They can be anywhere from 40 to 120 feet, depending on terrain, wind, a lot of factors, environmental factors. They can be 40 to 120 feet off the ground, and the queen goes up. Now, something that skews that a little bit is a barrier, and it's the same thing. When a queen gets to a woods, unless the bees are working tulip poplar or basswood or something in the woods, there's no Nasenov pheromone there, so she quits detecting Nasenov pheromone and goes up, which is why a lot of drone congregation areas are along a break in the terrain, like a woods, a creek bank with trees, a little copse of trees around the pond. If the queen is flying that way and gets there, she's going to go up, look for a drone congregation area.
How does she locate the drone congregation area? Can she smell them, or
she can smell the drones, but she don't have to be right in the area. Drones have super good eyesight, and they're not flying real fast in that drone congregation area. They're hanging out looking for a woman, They're not flying real fast, but all honeybees, 2 segments of the antenna are dedicated to smell. Drones, 3 segments are dedicated to smell. So they have, and it's an exponential increase. It's not 3 versus 2. It's more like 3 times 3 versus 2 times 2. So it's an exponential increase in ability to smell or sensitivity to scent. And so they can smell the queen, and then their eyes are way bigger,
right,
and then they can see the queen. So the queen don't have to go up right into the center of a drone congregation area. She just has to get within a couple hundred yards.
And they find her.
They find her, yeah. The drone congregation area will move to where the queen is. That's why when you see people that raise a balloon up with a queen pheromone, a virgin queen in a cage, and they put it on a helium balloon and raise it up where they think there might be a drone congregation area. If they have a camera on it, you'll see drones coming from somewhere and just swooping in on that.
Does she kind of hang around that area?
Well, while she's being mated, yeah.
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 And how does she know when she's been mated enough?
You have to ask her that. I don't know. I don't know.
She probably knows.
Yeah.
I've read that she has pressure sensors on her spermatheca.
Maybe.
Yeah, I've read that.
Okay.
But now the spermatheca, it won't have anything in it until she gets back to the hive, and she'll discard about 80% of what she took in.
Why?
She don't need it.
Wow.
One drone will have 4 times the amount of sperm that she would require for a lifetime of laying eggs. One drone. One drone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, then where does the term "not properly mated" come from?
From her taking a mating flight and mating with 4 drones instead of 24. And she gets back and there's plenty of sperm there, but she discards 80% of it.
Okay.
Or
And
does she keep it before it goes into the spermifica?
It's not like ounces of it. It's just tiny bits, and it's in the vaginal tract of the queen. When you instrumentally inseminate a queen, you can kind of see how all this works. And to properly instrumentally inseminate a queen, most breeders will put about 2 microliters in a queen, and that's enough for you to graft out of that queen for maybe a month and a half, and then she's done. She's going to be a drone layer from then on.
Because you just
one
drone.
You just used up everything that she had, and the good breeders, I didn't know any of this stuff until Jason Bragg started coming out here and teaching people about this, and that's the beginning and the end of what I know, is just what I've learned from people like that. Because I don't instrumentally inseminate. I don't have time to develop that skill set. I have the equipment available to me anyway, but my time is better spent raising queens, naturally mated queens, rather than instrumentally inseminating them. For one thing, my conscience wouldn't let me sleep charging $500 for a bug. You know, when I know that there's one in every one of these hives out here that are probably doing a better job than she's going to do. But you're doing that in order to propagate certain genetics. Anyway, Jason Bragg, Sue Colby, especially Sue Colby, and Jason Bragg, and Marla Spivak are at least 3 of the more prominent instrumental inseminators, and they all their baseline is 10 to 12 microliters, which is 5 to 6 times more than what most breeders put in. And a queen from Sue Colby that's instrumentally inseminated will be good the second year. And I asked Sue about that and why her queens were good, and she told me, we use more sperm, more semen. And I said, well, is that comparable to natural mating? And she said it's comparable to the amount of semen that the queen would have after she discards 80% of what she's got from mating with 20 to 24 drones. So that's kind of the baseline. They measure that in microliters.
Whereas if she only mated with, say, 4, after her 80% discard, there's not enough sperm remaining for her lifetime, correct?
No.
Okay.
But here's the other thing that's probably more important than that. And I'm incredibly lucky, blessed to know these people that are comfortable enough coming out here knowing that they don't have to wear a tie when they visit, and that we're going to cook for them. But people that have no reason to give me the time of day. Really, I'm no different than you guys. I'm just a beekeeper, but I've had a lot of experience. Most of it bad. Most of it I learned from. It, and I try not to repeat those bad things. But sometimes it happens. So I get a phone call from Jason, and which is not uncommon, but because he's kind of a common guy too, but he has a mind that's up here rather than on my level. And he said, "Do you mind if I bring some friends over and visit?" I said, "Of course not." I mean, I know he's going to bring people that are as smart or smarter than him. So I'm thinking, and I'm going to get to learn something here. Well, he brings one of the other. He's in the Purdue program, or had been,
Nice.
and he brings one of the other people from that, and 4 other beekeepers that are in the test yards, that run the test yards, not just for Purdue but for other. It was one guy from Georgia, Jason from West Virginia, 2 from Indiana, 1 from Tennessee, and 1 from Alabama. There were 6 people here altogether, and they get here, and I have no idea what they want. And he said it was about this time of year, and he said, "You've got bees that came back from almonds, don't you? Do you know which hives they are?" I said, "Yeah, I got them in their own yard." And he said, "Do you have bees that overwintered here?" I said, "Yep, I do." He said, "Can we catch drones from those?" And I thought they were wanting to milk drones and save the semen. And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "We're going to do a test. We want to catch 1,000 drones from each group." And
That's a lot of drones.
I said, "Okay." So yeah, you don't catch drones this time of day. Wait until at least noon. Put a queen excluder in front of the hive. Drones are flying at that time, and you lean the queen excluder up against it where the drones can come out and fly out. But when they come back, they're going to catch on that excluder. So we set about. We had, of course, they knew we'd cook for them. Jason had already told them that. But we had, and one of the other guys from Indiana, he'd been here several times before. But after lunch, we set about catching drones, and we caught 1,000 from each group of bees, and we spent the rest of the afternoon and evening crushing drones and collecting semen. If the drones are flying, they should be mature. They
Correct.
should be something that could mate a queen. And we crushed all those drones, and we never collected anything, which the reason they wanted to see how many were fertile and how many were not. It's easy to tell. If you crush a drone, if you avert the reproductive organs of the drone, if there's a cream color around the testes, it's fertile. If it's clear, it's infertile. And it's sterile. And we crushed them, and we had one guy with each group that all they were doing is writing down, marking down fertile versus
What's it
infertile.
called? The flagellum, or what that comes out? What's that called?
Yeah, flagellum.
Flagellum. Okay.
But we crushed those drones, and when we did the mathematics of it, I would have thought the California drones would have been less fertile, the ones that came from almonds, because they've been exposed to all this different stuff from bees from all over the United States that wound up there. They were in holding yards with other bees, and they were in orchards and exposed to all this stuff. And I would have thought they would have been the less fertile, and the ones that had overwintered here, maybe had been going for a couple of 3 years. I would have thought they would have been the better drones at this time of year. It was the opposite. The California drones were 62% fertile. Now, they were the most fertile, and still 4 out of 10 that would have mated with a queen would have been sterile.
So sterile drones will still try to mate with a queen.
Oh, they will mate with a queen. The queen will allow them to mate with her. They will furnish the queen with a similar amount of semen, but there's no sperm in it.
What causes a drone to be infertile?
That's the question. Now, the ones that had wintered here, the California bees were 62% fertile. The ones that wintered here were 58% fertile. And I thought, boy, that's really terrible.
Yeah, half your drones are infertile.
Yeah, but the guys that were just kind of giddy about it. And I said, well, what's so cool about all my drones being sterile? And they told me that the bees they checked at Purdue were only 46% fertile.
Oh.
So yours were
The
more.
bees they checked in West Virginia were 52% fertile, and that they had been to all these other guys' bee yards, and the California bees were 8% better than the best of the others. So, and even the bees that overwintered here were still 4% better than the others. And you catch 1,000 drones, it's simple mathematics. It's easy to figure.
Right.
And I was shocked, and I'm still shocked at that. If you're raising cattle and you got a 50-50 shot at your bull being fertile,
Yeah.
you're going to eat that rascal.
Yeah.
But it kind of struck a chord with me because it became obvious and my question with them, because they deal a lot more with the nuts and bolts of these figures than I do, was, does the queen discard the semen that is sterile? And they said no. They said that if a queen mates with 12 drones, 6 of them are infertile, 6 of them are fertile, that she will keep a sampling of each one.
How is that even possible?
Yeah. Wow.
She keeps a sampling of each one, and
She has the
therefore,
ability to eject.
yes,
That's insane.
yes, and this is where it gets even further into the weeds with Africanized bees.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is documented. Africanized drones mate with a queen, and the semen and sperm pellets are lined up in the duct there, not in the spermatheca, not in the
duct.
in the duct. And the Africanized sperm will compete to get to the front of the line.
That's ridiculous.
How does that happen? I mean,
That is.
Africanized bees force an advantage in the breeding process. The drones are faster. They fly earlier. They fly at lower temperatures. They fly later in dusky dark. So, I mean, they're available more often.
Yeah.
They're faster than the European drones.
So they'll be
And their
selective.
sperm actually competes with European sperm to get to the front of the line. And in the spermatheca as well as in the duct. So you have these pellets, sperm pellets, and the queen picks some of each one, and she has that ability. Africanized queens that are mated choose Africanized sperm.
Wow.
They will pick that at a higher ratio compared to,
which will make an extra spicy worker bee.
and the drones, any bees, the drones control the majority of the genetics for temperament, and the drones control the majority of the genetics for color. Color and temperament are drone characteristics controlled mostly by them, and hygienic behavior and brood production, how prolific a queen is, whether she starts laying early in the season, how late she is likely to be laying in the season, whether it takes a lot to stimulate her to begin laying. All that is queen stuff from the queen side.
Is that why a colony can be hot and then turn gentle?
Exactly.
If she runs out of Africanized
Exactly.
drone sperm
That's exactly
and switches
why.
over to European.
If you have a drone, it's not just Africanized. It's just a hive that's hot.
A hot drone.
Yeah. And you have a nice gentle queen, and she mates with one of those and 9 gentle drones. Then, unless it's Africanized, you got roughly 10% of the bees that the queen is going to produce are going to be ill-tempered.
Yep.
And when she runs out of that, you might have a hive that is rough, and then maybe 2 weeks later you go out there and you think, wonder what happened. They're nicer, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You got one that's been your pet all year, and you go out there and they try to kill you. Yeah. And that's a product of a different drone fertilizing the the queen, or the queen fertilizing eggs with sperm from a different drone. So a poorly mated queen is not just one that mates with fewer drones. It's one that mates with fewer fertile drones.
Yes. Now, theories on fertile versus infertile. The only difference I can think of is maybe the nutrition that the drone took in.
Well,
Maybe.
we were sitting here. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening when we finally got our figures together. It takes a long time to crush 1,000 drones.
Oh, good grief.
2,000, yeah,
Yeah, because you
2,000.
get 1,000 from each
But-
yard.
But it's about 8 o'clock in the evening, and we're sitting here talking about just that. Why
Why?
is this way? Because the reason they came here was because they were shocked at what they were finding, and they were thinking maybe it's the line breeding that we've been doing at Purdue. Or maybe it's the line breeding that we inadvertently do in our own yard.
Shocked at the number of infertile that
Right.
was so high that half
Yeah.
the bees. Okay.
Yeah.
They would have expected maybe
80.
80 or okay.
Right. They were thinking 80 to 90% fertile, and they were getting 40 to 50% fertile.
Wow.
And they were shocked, and that was part of the reason that they wanted to come here. It's like I was the last stop on the bus route, because they thought, well, we'll go there and maybe we'll find something different. They didn't really find anything different. They just found a little difference in the numbers, but they didn't find any different thing. And we were talking about why, and I had mentioned nutrition, the possibility that it was nutrition, and one of the fellas, Joe May, he was from Indiana. He said, who would even know that? Who would we get in touch with to find out if that's right? And I said, I got somebody in mind, but I don't have his phone number, but I know who I would call if I had his number. And Jason Bragg said, Adam Finkelstein. I said, yeah, exactly. That's who I want to call, because he is a genius in nutrition information. And Jason said, well, you're in luck. I've got his number.
Wow.
And then he said, if he will answer the phone. He said, you can't get Jason to answer the phone or can't get Adam to answer the phone most of the time. Well, he called, and sure enough, he answered. And we talked to him for about 30 minutes on the phone. And his conclusion, he was shocked too, actually. And if you can shock Adam Finkelstein, you've accomplished something. But
Where's he live? Where's he from?
I think he's from Vermont or somewhere like that, somewhere up east. But he said, yeah, probably nutrition. And the reason he got that conclusion was that the highest percentage was almond bees.
Meaning more nutrition available?
Better nutrition. Almond pollen is almost the perfect protein for honeybees just by itself. It has honeybees can't digest all of the amino acids. They can only digest 5 really well, and there's 2 to 3 more that they can partially digest. And almond pollen has 5 of the ones that they can. It has 1 that's partial and 4 that are definitely digestible.
Do drones feed themselves in a colony, or do workers feed drones?
Drones feed themselves until they start flying on mating flights. Once they start taking mating flights, they're not capable of feeding themselves enough to replenish the energy they just burned off.
So they'll get fed what? Bee bread or
bee bread or
any royal
fresh
jelly?
pollen. Fresh pollen. No royal jelly.
No royal jelly.
Fresh pollen even. But bee bread or fresh pollen and a little bit of nectar.
And the worker feeds the drone?
Worker feeds the drone. There's usually 2 or 3 workers feeding a drone. But that's when they're flying. They're burning up so much energy that they're not capable of taking in enough nutrition by themselves. They have really small mandibles, and they're not capable of taking in enough nutrition to enable them to take another flight.
Those calories.
Yeah. And go out in the middle of the day, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, set up a queen excluder and catch a drone that just comes in from a flight and hold it in your hand like this. It will burn your hand.
Hot.
It is so hot it will be uncomfortable in your hand. They burn up a lot of calories flying.
Just
Yeah.
Is the peach orchard, peach and almonds are real closely related trees.
That's really good protein too.
So if it's nutrient, if I was the researchers, I'd be going and looking at peach orchard
Yep.
bees as well.
Yep.
And see if that really is the case.
It would that would be a good next move on that to see. Well, they wouldn't really have to look at the bees in a peach orchard. They would just have to look at the protein. I mean, they already have the baseline that almond bees are 10 to 15% more fertile than other bees. So just yeah, if they check the almond pollen, they know what protein is in almond pollen, and if they check the peach pollen against that, and if it had similar protein, then they could put a hive of bees out there and see if it translated in that. But to see if it translated means you got to wait about 8 weeks, and then
research that's short.
yeah. But with peach pollen, they're not going to be pollinating for 8 weeks. You've got about a 2-week window there that they're going to. So you would make the find in one season and then wait till the next spring to actually confirm it with the bees. But that's a really good point, because and it's not just peaches, it's apricots, stone fruit like that should have a similar pollen. An almond is just a poor peach. But and that's part of the mystery between good queens versus bad queens, early supersedures versus queens that stay in for 2 years. They're more fertile. They don't become drone layers, and you can have a queen if you're using that same principle of infertile drones, and the queen's actually keeping some of that semen and that has no sperm in it. If you're using that, then you might have a queen that's not a drone layer that becomes a drone layer that later is not a drone layer.
Well, that was my question. So, is it possible that a drone was actually a function of, the queen intended to fertilize that egg?
Exactly.
It was just fertilized with infertile sperm.
Well,
versus she can just lay. She can choose not to fertilize, right?
Or
but the end result would be the same.
Or even if she discarded the infertile semen, that means that she mated with 10 drones and discarded all of that was infertile, even at that. So she's still short, and she becomes a drone layer too early.
How does it become a drone when it's infertile egg?
Drone is an infertile egg. Could that be the infertile sperm?
Could be.
Yeah.
And I mean that's the way it happens when you have a queen that lays a drone egg, an unfertilized egg in a worker-sized cell. She thinks she's laying a fertilized egg.
Yeah.
If she lays a drone egg in a drone-sized cell, she knows what she's doing, and she never attempted to fertilize it.
Because she's sticking her head in those cells and measuring, and that's how she's determining which she's going to lay, right?
Yeah. Front feet. She measures with her front feet. That's why when you catch a queen, the queens that I caught yesterday, showed everybody how you hold a queen, you catch a queen, how you hold them. Never grab the front legs, because if you damage one of them, and you don't always damage one when you do it, But if you damage that front foot, she will never be anything but a drone layer because she's not able to measure the cells properly. And she don't take a chance. She just lays the drone egg, unfertilized egg in it.
So a drone laying queen is not never going back. She could actually turn back into a good laying queen.
I would say rare circumstances, but yeah.
Okay.
And how much time do you have to play with that, though?
Well,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you pull a frame out like this hive down here that we saw the first day. You pull a frame out that has a whole bunch of drone cells in it, and it's all wonky and everything. And I'm not keeping that queen. I mean, she's
Telling me
there.
There's a chance.
She's there begging me. Look, I promise I got some left in the tank here. You know, I promise. Just give me time.
Give me time, Kent. Give me time.
Yeah. I'm like,
Nope.
you're out of time, girl. You know, there ain't that much time here. But
Gosh, that was perfect Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic.
but I mean, there's so many variables involved in good queen versus bad queen versus queen that has hot bees versus a queen that does not have hot bees. They can be hot 1 week, 3 weeks later, a totally different disposition to the hive. It's all about mating and all about the drone that mated the queen and what position in line in the spermatheca that the sperm is. It's sometimes I'm sure we replace a hot queen that's the only sperm that she's got that would produce hot bees. And then later they'd be nice bees.
What you're literally saying is there's so many variables, there's no way you know what the heck's going on.
And in that case, you revert back to the philosophy of you do the best you can with what you got and learn to live with it. And I'm a little reluctant to just mash a queen. Even when I'm replacing a queen, now this drone layer down here, she's going to get mashed because she has got on my last nerve, you know, and she's going to get mashed. And it's kind of like the coffee cup saying, you know, you see the coffee cups, it says, oh, look, it's Kent's last nerve. Let's stomp it, you know. But she's going to get mashed. But if I'm requeening a hive, whether it's a hot hive or whether it's a poor laying pattern, and that there's another thing, you know, that could be inconsistent mating. But when I'm going to replace a queen, I'll remove the queen, make a small nuke with her, and sometimes she comes right back. Sometimes I'll make a small nuke with her, put feed on them, just in case there's a nutritional basis to the whole issue, and sometimes she'll come back, and I will wind up using her to requeen a queenless hive or something on that order, and sometimes they don't. You just do the best that you can with the information, the knowledge, and the material that you have, and hope that it works out to suit you.
I got a question on. I done what you're talking about. I requeened. I kept the old queen. Now she was a 2-year-old queen. Would it be a good idea to pull queens off of her, even though she's weak and slow with longevity?
Your
Go with
genetics are the same.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're wanting to breed from the queen line,
Yeah.
your genetics are the same.
With longevity, does that go with the queen or is that a drone queen?
No, the longevity has more to do with the queen side and with how well she was mated.
Okay.
A queen that's not mated well is not going to live a long time.
Okay.
They're going to
They're gonna
supersede.
supersede her.
That's right. She's going to get superseded.
Okay.
But a queen that just does not have the genetics to like I said, it's the prolific production, brood production. Queens of a certain line might start laying the very first pollen that comes in. Here, it's January. We have one type of maple that blooms in January. If you have 3 or 4 days of temperatures where it gets into the low 50s, you'll have maples begin to bloom, and it's on at that point. Some queens will start with that. Some will not start until mid-February. So you got a 3 week difference, sometimes a 4 week difference there, and it's basically the same kind of queen. But for instance, say a Minnesota hygienic queen, and that line, but some will start early, some will be later. Some require more stimulation, more pollen, better pollen, different pollen, or pollen plus nectar.
Yeah.
And some will start with that first little influx of pollen. It nearly always starts with pollen, though. If there's no protein, they're not likely to start just blowing up the brood nest with brood. But that's a queen thing. And it's not a Minnesota hygienic versus a 3-banded Italian versus a mutt. It's not that. It's within each breed. That's a genetic line. Like my family came from Wales and Scotland, but you get another guy that his family came from Wales and Scotland, and we're different. So it's the same way with queens. You can have a Minnesota hygienic that starts early, and every queen you raise from her will have that. She'll have that same propensity to start early, and that's carried by the queen. How late they will lay in the fall. Some queens will quit in August when it's a dearth, if you have a dearth in August. But as soon as you have a little goldenrod, they'll just blow right back up. Some queens quit in August, and it doesn't matter what you do. They're done for the year. It's like, well, I've done my year's work. I'm out of here. And usually they're right. They are out of here because those are the hives that don't overwinter as well, if at all. And that's a queen thing.
But it's not the queen deciding that, right? Isn't it the workers that are deciding when she slows down? And
not always.
Okay.
I mean, the queen will have that genetic characteristic to lay late or to not lay late, and it doesn't matter what the workers do. They can be feeding her, and or they can be
withholding food.
or they can be cannibalizing eggs, for that matter. And
she'll keep laying.
If
she has that genetic quality.
If she has that genetic characteristic, but some of them don't. Now, one of the issues that it has become apparent with the Purdue bees, they do exactly what they were supposed to do. They chew the legs off of mites, and they're good at it. But the issue is trying to get that trait where you can replicate it through the queen line, and hadn't been done.
It's not working
because that is a defensive trait, not a hygienic trait.
Which comes from the drones?
Comes from the drones mostly. So if you wanted mite biter queens, mite biter bees, you'd be better off making a drone yard that had Purdue queens in it. That would produce Purdue drones, which would mate with your queens, which would give you mite biter bees. So they should be pushing that, because you're going to have a lot more of their queens to furnish a drone yard rather than just one queen to breed from. So they should be pushing that.
Help them, Josh.
You got a moth in your beard. You got a friend.
Well, yeah, there's all kind of critters here that will get in your hair, get in your beard, get up your britches legs, get in your sleeves. It happens.
What's your favorite type of queen?
A live one.
Except for the one he's about to crow.
Right.
Yeah. A productive live one. The hives that I choose to graft from to make queens are the ones that, number one, of course, survive the winter. I want bees that have overwintered here. And number two, they start earlier in the spring and they build up the quickest. Those are the bees that will make you money. And I mean, we're not really talking about making money here, but the same ones that'll make you money are the ones that'll stay alive. That'll be a big hive and they'll stay alive. You might have to feed them, but if I quit feeding these goats out here, they're going to get mighty skinny and finally they'll die.
Yeah.
And bees are livestock, and we need to learn to get comfortable treating them like livestock. And I don't feed them during a honey flow if I'm wanting to collect honey from them, but after I collect honey from them, if I want them to thrive rather than just survive, I'll put feed on them, or if they need feed. If they're not working, I'll make sure they stay working. And most of the time when we feed bees, it has nothing to do with making sure they got something to eat. It has everything to do with keeping the queen laying. You keep the queen laying as late into the fall as you can. You'll get young bees coming into the winter, and you'll have a healthy hive coming into the spring. But if you depend on a natural flow, that natural flow may or may not be there. And if it's not there and the queen quits laying, you're going to have old bees going into the winter.
Yeah.
And if they survive the winter, coming into the spring, they're going to take forever to build up, because old bees are not very good at producing brood food. Their glands are atrophied. And old bees just slow build up. And eventually, if everything else works right, eventually they'll survive, but they won't make you a honey crop. Unless, of course, you're waiting for a fall crop. Then they might be big enough to make one. But try to keep your queens laying as late in the fall as possible, even if you have to feed them. And, you know, the price of sugar is terrible, but it's not as bad as the price of a new hive of bees. So, I mean, I can justify paying 70 cents a pound for sugar if I'm thinking, well, 70 cents a pound for sugar, you mix it half and half with sugar or with water, or a little bit less than half and half with water, and that cuts it down to 35 cents a pound for your feed. And that's cheap insurance for your bees staying alive. Just don't do it with honey super zone if you're going to harvest the honey. Sugar syrup honey is chemically still honey. The bees have they've added invertase and inverted the sugars, and it is still honey. It just don't taste like much. It's very bland, and well, it just don't taste like honey.
So do the strongest colonies coming into the spring typically produce the most honey, just because of the numbers?
If you can keep them from swarming.
Yeah, that's the
it.
catch-22, right? I mean, and
you're on that fine line there.
I have that conundrum at times. Like, if I have a really strong colony, I know they're going to get swarmy on me. Do I go ahead and split them? But in doing so, I'm probably not going to get as much of a honey crop from that.
You won't get as much of a honey crop, but you'll get more honey crop than you would if you let them swarm.
Okay.
Yeah, because they take it away with them. Yeah.
Okay.
One third or more of the bees are going to leave. Those are the young bees. They're sucking up all the honey they can hold before they leave. And they leave, well, that makes the old bees have to do the young bees' job for a little while. And you got a break there. And a brood break is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It is very helpful in a hive for natural control of pests and parasites. But you got you're going to have 10 to 14 days of break there. That means you move down the line 4 to 5 weeks, and you've got that break where there should be foragers there that aren't.
Okay.
Ideally, you want a queen laying full bore 6 weeks before your honey flow starts. Ideally. Morning, Wes. It is still morning, I think.
The bell didn't go off yet.
Well, that's true.
What time is it?
We're going to wait until we're in the middle of making a cell builder before the bell goes off.
In the rain.
In the rain. I hope it don't rain
It's
today.
not supposed to rain today.
I'm going to go back to that hive and I'm going to make them like, I want to make them like me.
Sing them a nice song.
Well, there's singing the nice song, and then there's kicking the hive over off into the fence row and telling them to fend for themselves.
You got choices here.
That's right. So let's go out and is everybody familiar with how to make a cell builder? It doesn't matter how good you are at grafting, you need a cell builder. And you can be really good at grafting and have a mediocre cell builder, and you'll be a total failure at raising queens. A good cell builder will make any grafter look like a genius. As long as you have the right age larva, a good cell builder will fix your mistakes. But if you only need a few queens every year, if you just need queens to replace your old queen or to make 1 or 2 splits per hive, then grafting is not necessary. It's a really cool thing to know how to do, but it's not necessary. A double screen or a cloak board will get you all the queens that you're going to need to replace what you've got, and they'll be good queens. If you recognize what a good queen cell looks like. If you're using emergency cells, they're not going to be any better than just kind of a so-so queen if it's an emergency cell, because the bees, an emergency cell, they make a queen out of the oldest possible larva, which is a 3 to 3.5 day old larva, because they need a queen. Emergency cell, all of a sudden they've lost a queen. And when you use a double screen or a cloak board, that's exactly the situation they're in. To them, they've lost a queen. So they will make some emergency cells, but they'll also make some good cells. So you just have to recognize the difference between the two. And when we go out and look in a hive to make a cell builder, I'll show you how one differs from the other, and how that you would not choose emergency cells, and you can purposefully choose good queen cells. Cut them out. Use them. I mean, a hive will make a dozen or more decent queen cells just by dequeening it at this time of year. Just by dequeening it, cut them out and use them in other hives. Use them in nukes. Make your split with a queen cell, and you will be less frustrated, more successful, and feel pretty good about your beekeeping when it works, compared to learning to graft, making a cell builder. And that's if you just need, if you have 20 hives and you think you might need 30 queens, a double screen or a cloak board is the way to go. The bees do the work. All you have to do is recognize what they've done and take advantage of that. This is, in a way, this is kind of forcing the issue on the bees. We will be removing larvae, putting the larvae in these cups, and putting these cups in a queenless hive, which becomes our cell builder. And they're stimulated to raise a queen cell because, number one, they don't have a queen in there, and number two, they got young bees and plenty of food in there, and number three, they have material to make a queen out of that's on a vertical axis. That's a stimulant. That's a trigger for the bees to make a queen cell on a vertical axis, and they will choose this over making an emergency cell if you give them the opportunity to choose that.
Are supersedure cells as good as swarm cells?
Yes.
Quality? Okay.
Supersedure cells and swarm cells are planned out. They're planned.
So they're not using a 3.5 day old larva?
No. A supersedure cell, they'll use a day to 2 day larva. A swarm cell, they'll use a day to 2 day larva.
Okay.
An emergency cell, they almost never use anything less than a 3-day-old
Because
larva.
they want to queen as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, we don't have a queen. We got to have one right now. Well, right now is 10 days from now. But if they use a 1-day-old cell, right now is 12 days from now.
Right.
And
And
if
they
you
don't care that it would be a higher quality queen, I guess.
well, and that's where that at some point in every year, if you keep bees very long, at some point you're going to adopt that same philosophy as the bees making an emergency cell. At some point you're going to realize that any queen's better than no queen. Any queen that you get, even if you think that she's not going to last for 2 weeks, she's at least going to produce a little bit of brood, and you can make another
And you
queen
can make
from her.
another queen from it.
Hey, Ken,
Yeah.
back up just a second. You said you put those cups in the Queenless hive.
Yeah.
How do you kill a queen that's in the hive, or do you?
Well, there's 2 ways to do it. What I used to do was find the queen and take her and a couple of frames of bees, take the queen and a couple of frames of bees, and make a nuke with them, move that nuke away, and then take the bees. And the way I like to make a cell builder is to use mostly capped brood. But the reason I use mostly capped brood is because I'm going to set that, I use a 5-frame nuke box. I'm going to set that nuke box where it catches all the foragers from the original hive. If you're going to move your cell builder, then you need uncapped brood. You need larvae to hold the bees in there. But I don't have to have that because I'm going to put it where it catches all the foragers. There's nothing going to be lost. So, and that capped brood, it's going to give a huge influx of young bees within a week and a half. Every deep frame that's fairly solid with capped brood, both sides, that's 1.5 pounds of bees. So if you have 2 deep frames, that's like dumping a 3-pound package in that nuke in a week and a half. And if it's capped, within 11 days, it'll be a worker bee. So those are the things that you have to keep in mind, especially if you're just inspecting hives and thinking, well, it's not really that many bees in this hive, but there's a lot of capped brood. In a week and a half, you better be putting another box on it because they're gonna overpopulate their brood nest, and you're gonna have a swarm in a week and a half. So those are just things you'd have to remember. But I take 4 frames of capped brood. I take 4 more frames and brush the bees off into that 5-frame nuke box. Then I move the original hive and set the 5-frame nuke box where to catch all the foragers. So you got 4 to 5 times as many bees as should be in that nuke box. And then you put a frame that has these cell bars in it right in the center of that. And they'll make a lot of queen cells that way. I just caught the queen or moved her into a nuke box, and I started having a lot of failures in my cell builders. Enough so that I would start 2 to 3 at the same time. One of them would always have a queen in it, meaning that there was more than one queen in that hive. So now what I do, I shake all or brush all the bees off of the frames, put the frames of brood in an empty box, and refill the bottom box with other frames, drawn comb usually, and I put a queen excluder over that, put all the brood on top of the queen excluder, and give it a couple of 3 hours, and the bees will come, the young bees, which is what you want anyway, they'll come up through that excluder to take care of the brood. I can go back and I can pull frames out, confident there's no queen on it. And from there, the procedure is the same. 4 frames of brood, 4 more frames of bees, set it where it's catching the foragers. And those sort of mating nukes will make you some queen cells.
Are you shaking the nurse bees into the cell builder, or you're just placing those frames into the cell builder?
I used to, and even now, when I'm in a hurry, I'll shake the bees into the cell builder. But I prefer to brush them into the cell builder because when you shake them, sometimes it makes that larva go up against the top of the cell, and it makes it harder to graft. So anymore, I tend to brush the bees into the cell builder rather than shaking them. But and if you brush the bees with something organic, like a wad of grass or a thing of pine needles, it don't make them mad at all. They don't really mind that much. If you use a yellow brush, they will hate you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it makes them mad.
And I don't understand why. I mean, but it does. I mean, and that's proof that you can always learn something from somebody. There was a lady here one year that I wouldn't have believed her hardly if she said that water was wet. I just didn't give her much credit for knowing anything. And I was brushing bees with a yellow brush, and they didn't just hate me, they hated everybody around, they they were upset. And she said, "Why don't you just use a wad of this grass?" And I was like, "Really?" So she pulls up a wad of grass, and I hand her a frame, and I said, "There you go." And she brushed them off, and they just kind of fell off in the hive. They didn't fly up and try to eat us alive. And I thought, now who's the dumb one?
I'll be darned.
Yeah. So don't ever think that you know so much that somebody else can't teach you something. So ever since then, I mean that was on a Thursday of the bee school, and on Friday I got a wad of grass and brushed it off. And very few of the things that I do, I came up with myself. Almost everything I stole the idea from somebody, or borrowed it, or co-opted it, or something. So when when somebody says, "Well, that's really neat. You're so smart. Figure that out." I said, "No, that was an idea that came from Darren Strauss, or that came from Dwight Gunner, or that came from Jim Henready. Some of the guys that that were important to me when I was learning how to make your living with bees. That. So I don't mind giving credit where it's due, especially to people that taught me something that keeps me from getting stung as bad.
Are you going to make a cell builder out there today?
I am.
Okay.
I'm going to make a cell builder. I'm figuring that they're probably working on the trailer out there, because there's some big hives on that trailer, and unless they've broken them all down, we'll make a cell builder out of one of those.
We gotta check the cells you did the other day.
We can look at them and see how few there are. I didn't really, the cell builder I made the other day, I wasn't really tickled with the population in it. I figure they'll make a few cells. I don't think it's going to be 2/3 of them. I think it'll be a third to a half, maybe.
Is that because they'll focus on certain ones? If it's a low population and
If it's a low population, they'll pick and choose. That's right. They'll make cells out of the more closely related larvae. And I also like to graft out of the same hive that I'm making a cell builder from.
Right. Can you explain that process one more time?
What?
How you create the cell builder? Because some people, their donor colony is different than the cell builder colony. They basically steal nurse bees from a donor colony and try to pack the cell builder.
Yeah.
But you're using one colony.
I'm using one colony so that there's no disruption in there.
And you shake all the bees in the top box down into the bottom, right?
brushes them.
Or brush,
Yeah.
brush them
Just off of brood frames, I pull all the brood frames out
from the top box.
From both of them.
Oh, from both of them.
Both of them.
Okay.
Because you may not have anything in the top box you can graft from, or you may have cap brood in the bottom, nothing in the top. So I'm brushing all the bees that off of brood frames, only brood
The
frames.
first thing you're doing is identifying a good frame. That's the first thing
Yeah.
you're doing. Okay, to graft from.
No, not to graft from. As I'm doing that, I'm looking and keeping it cataloged
Okay.
that this would be a good frame to graft from.
Okay.
But that's as I'm brushing bees off.
But you're
And
not pulling that frame out yet.
no,
You're moving it to the top.
I'm moving it to the top
Okay.
because that's
Open or
gonna
open brood?
open brood, because the frame that I move to the top that I might graft out of, that might be the one that causes bees to come up.
Right.
And they're not going to come up for pupa. They don't care about pupa. And there's a conundrum kind of thing there, because larva is way tougher than pupa. Larva can stand really cool temperatures. 35 degrees will not kill larva. 35 degrees will absolutely wipe out pupa.
And that's when it's capped as pupa.
That's when it's capped.
Okay.
Cool temperatures being under 90 degrees
Okay.
will kill pupa. It's called chill brood. You see it every year here anyway. The queen lays a big pattern. The cluster's not big enough to cover the entire pattern. When it gets really cool, it will have a 30-degree night. The cluster's here, the pattern's out here. You have chill brood out here.
And they'll uncap and remove that dead pupa, right?
They uncap it, but they're usually really slow about it, which scares you to death because it looks and smells a little bit like AFB, foul brood. It'll have a similar look, but it won't string out.
Is it falling off?
Yeah, it'll have a similar look, but you can take a twig or a toothpick, stir that pupa up, and it won't string out. That's chill brood. If it's American foul brood, it will string out. And stringing out don't mean a little peak that comes up like that. Stringing out is when it looks like you pull bubble gum out of your mouth.
Okay, so you brush all the bees from the top box into the bottom.
And from the bottom, all brood frame. Brush the bees from brood frames.
How do you
into
ensure
the
the
bottom.
queen is in the bottom, though? Because you're getting ready to put the queen excluder on, right?
Because you've brushed all the bees off into there.
In there. That was on the brood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All the bees go into the bottom, and that includes bees in the top box, but you're focusing on brood frames.
Okay.
And you finish filling the box. You got 20 frames in 2 deeps. All the brood frames get brushed off, and all the other frames that are food that don't have brood on them just go into the bottom. Because you're not worried about that. We're wanting brood comb.
Open brood comb up top.
Open and closed.
And
Everything.
closed.
Everything.
Okay.
Because you're going to be pulling out of that to make your cell builder.
Okay.
So you want everything, all the brood
so then you
up
put
the
your
top.
queen excluder on. You've got all the brood frames up above.
Yep.
And then you close the hive up.
Close the hive up and let the young bees come up to take care of the brood.
And you're coming back when? A couple hours later?
A couple hours at least.
Okay.
It's best if you do it one afternoon and give them overnight to come up.
Okay.
That's best.
Okay.
But we're not going to take that much time today.
Right. So then you go back in the hive. You're like, this is a great frame. And then you pull that frame out of the hive to graft from. Brush the nurse bees off.
Yep.
And then are you putting an empty comb frame back in its place?
At the same time that I choose a frame to graft from, and I'll take a separate nuke box with me, and I'll keep the bees on that frame that I'm going to graft from. I'll put them in a nuke box, close it up, and that's because they're going to keep that larva from drying out.
Okay.
And larva, that's the worst thing that can happen to larva, to dry out. You're not going to kill it by getting it chilled. You might freeze it and kill it, but you're not going to kill it by getting it chilled. But if you let it dry out, it's done for. And they will not make a queen from it. The larva probably won't survive.
So you keep the nurse bees on that grafting frame.
Yep.
Put it in an empty nuke box.
Put it in an empty nuke, set that to the side, and I take the nuke that's going to be the cell builder, and that's when I load up the nuke that's going to be a cell builder.
Okay.
And right then, I got my graft frame over here with bees on it. Got the nuke that's going to be a cell builder. I put 4 frames, mostly capped brood, in that.
From up above, from the whatever.
Above the queen excluder.
Yeah. You grab those frames and put them in a new nuke.
Yep, and 4 of them. I take all the other frames in that top box and brush the bees off into that nuke. Usually it's about another 4 frames. Brush them off into the nuke. Then close that nuke up, I move that hive to another bottom board, and I put the nuke where it will catch all the foragers come, where the entrance is right where the entrance to that other hive was.
Is it a 5-frame nuke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mean you moved the donor colony away?
Right.
Okay.
So the queen
But
is,
it's still missing 5 frames up top.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you just put 5 new frames in there? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Put 5 different frames in there, take your excluder off, put 5 different frames in there.
And it's done.
For the time
For the
being.
time being.
Yeah, for the time being it's done. And you're catching all of those bees coming back in to the
cell
the
builder.
forager. A good cell builder, when you look at it dusky dark after making it, you shouldn't be able to see the front of the hive.
That many bees.
It should be so many hives that they can't all, or so many bees that they can't all get in there.
Is that why you use a 5-frame nuke
Yep.
to do your cell builder?
That's
you
exactly
can just
why.
pack it with bees?
It's way easier to overcrowd a 5-frame
Than
nuke
it is a 10.
than it is a 10.
Okay.
And I get as many cells in a 5-frame nuke as my neighbor gets in a 10-frame Queenless cell builder. So I don't see the downside for me. He loves to use Queenless cell builders, and he does a good job. But we actually kind of tracked that one year, and his Queenless cell builder didn't have any longer life than my Queenless cell builder did, because his queen got superseded. You're always jacking around with a queen in a Queenless cell builder. You're having to move her top to bottom, rotate everything around.
Okay.
And something important to remember is that every time that you go into a hive and go into the brood nest, there's a possibility the bees are going to kill the queen.
Because you've disrupted it.
Every time. All you've got to do to get the queen killed is make one bee really angry, where it's releasing alarm pheromone, and the queen gets some of that alarm pheromone on her, and they will kill her.
They'll ball.
Yep, they'll kill her.
I've had that issue where I've moved the queen around in like 2 different mating nukes. They killed the queen once I put it back together.
Right.
So yeah.
And knowing that, it's kind of amazing that any of them survive.
No So you take your grafting frame, you go ahead and do your grafts,
Yep.
and then you stick that grafting frame in your
Right,
cell builder.
right in the center
Right
of
in
the cell
center of
builder.
the cell builder.
When you go back to the cell builder to put the grafting frame in, it should look like a solid mat of bees
Yeah.
that you have to force out of the way to
Yeah.
get that frame in.
And there's no food in the cell builder. It's nothing but brood frames.
There'll be a little food in it, but no, I mean most queen producers that I know try to put a frame of pollen right next to the graft. Instead of doing that, I put a pollen patty right on top of the graft, and I'll put a pollen patty
And thin
about this big around,
Okay.
and then thin syrup on
So
right
you
on
are
top of the
feeding
graft.
them. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And that makes a really big difference. But say there's no food in there, but you got all of the
Foragers
foragers
coming
that
back.
are bringing food in. The reason I put food on them is the same reason that I put a syrup bottle on hives that are on nukes that I'm building that are in canola. They're bringing in nectar and pollen by the bucket loads in just nuke boxes. But I keep a syrup bottle on them because it gets dark and the foragers aren't bringing anything in the dark. And the bees can actually have food available 24 hours a day. And when they're on a big honey flow, they don't take very much syrup at all, but they do take some, which means after dark, they still had the grocery open.
How many days after you close the cell builder up do you come back and look at the graphs?
2 days.
2 days.
I come back in 2 days because I use 2 day cells until I get all my mating nukes filled.
Okay. In
And
2 days, it hasn't been capped yet.
no, of course
So,
not.
right,
No,
So what are you looking at? Just how much royal jelly's in them? Or
no, I'm just looking if they made any.
if they made any.
Yeah,
Okay.
they won't all. I'm not the guy that you see on Facebook that's smiling and
Yeah.
holding up a thing, and there's all these gigantic cells on there. That's not me. Most of the time, I don't want anybody taking a picture of my graft because most of the time there's 15 here and there'll be 10 of them that have a cell and 5 of them that won't. But it becomes an exercise in mathematics, or that if you know you need 75 cells and you know that you're getting 10 per bar, then you graft 8 bars. And if you were to get 15, you got a lot of extra cells, and you start calling your beekeeper neighbors, do you need a queen cell? And if you don't, you put the capped cells in one of these and put it above a queen excluder on a queen ride hive between 2 frames of brood, and they'll take care of the virgins if they're going to be any good. The bees can tell if that virgin has the potential to be a good queen or not.
And if not, they'll starve her.
If it's not, they'll starve her to death. Yeah. When you have a queen bank or you have a virgin bank either, you're going to have some that don't survive it. The bees aren't stinging them through there. They're not mad at them. They're not attacking them. They just quit feeding them.
Yeah.
And they'll starve to death. Those are the queens. Don't be upset about that, even though I do get upset about that. Don't be upset about that because they're culling your bees for you,
Right.
your queens for you. Those are queens that don't have the potential to
Be a good queen.
to be a good queen and not get superseded. You might put them in a hive and they'd be superseded within 2 or 3 weeks. And you see that all the time with queens that you introduce. You'll introduce a queen and you'll think, well, these Georgia queens are terrible. And they're not all terrible. Some of them are really good queens, but they were pulled out of them. They were pulled out of a mating nuke before they had a chance to prove themselves, really. And you can't tell that they were laying 4 eggs out of every 8 cells. You can't tell that. So, and it's all about quality. That's all about quality control. The guys that run the big queen production places and package producers, the guys that are running those used to be the guys that were doing the work. That was their family business, and they used to be the guys doing the work, and they know exactly how to do it, and they know what makes a good queen, what don't. They know how to tell if this one's going to be good or not. Now they're running it, and they have crews that are pulling queens, and the crews are not working for a career. The crews are working for a paycheck.
Right.
And if it looks like a queen, it gets pulled.
Wow.
And put in and most of them are pretty good queens, except for the ones that ain't. So
2 days goes by, you go in, you say, okay, they're making queen cells. Great. You close it back up.
well, if all of my mating nukes are full, I close it back up. If I still have mating nukes that are not full, I put 3 frames of bees. There's 1 frame full of brood, a frame of food, and a frame of bees. And then I put a couple of other frames just to keep them from rattling around. And I'll put one of those 2-day cells that is not finished in between, right in the middle of the brood nest.
So you let the mating nuke finish the cell.
Yeah.
act as a finisher.
A 3-frame mating nuke will finish 1 cell and do a really good job of it.
Okay.
But they won't finish 10 cells.
And the mating nuke is hopelessly queenless.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they'll finish that. Okay.
They'll finish the
What
cell.
if all your mating nukes are full and you don't need to use a cell anything? You close the cell builder back up and wait for them to cap it?
Yep. I'll wait until the 7th day, and I'll pull the cells out on the 7th day.
And use that.
Use this. Even if you've grafted a 1-day-old larva on the 7th day, it'll be capped. And I use this, and I'll make a virgin bank.
And you're placing this whole
Yep.
frame in a virgin
The whole
bank.
frame in a virgin bank.
Okay.
And
And then you wait for them to emerge and then leave them in there for 7 days.
Yep.
And then you place those virgins in mating nukes.
when we kind of get rolling, raising queens, everything is on a 7-day rotation, because on the day that I pull these cells, they go into the queen bank, the virgin bank, and I'll graft again and put that graft back into the cell builder.
Okay. Because
And-
you just removed this from the cell.
Because I just removed it. And when I put this, after I put this into this virgin bank, I will have a 7-day seven-day virgins in there, and I'll take that out and put them in mating nukes. In between that, you know, if we're doing this on Mondays, and sometimes it's Tuesday before those 7-day virgins get put in, because I'm having to go around the mating nukes and pull mated queens out
Okay.
and put them in a queen right cell bank. Don't ever mix your queen right cell bank with your virgin, because they'll leave the virgins alone and feed the mated queens.
Now, why are you deciding it for your mating nukes? Why are you what's the difference between putting in a 7-day-old virgin or putting in a 2-day-old cell?
8 days. You're losing 8 days with a 2-day cell, and the reason I use 2-day cells is because I can roll that cell builder over every 3rd day and get another graft out of it, and roll it over every 3rd day, get another graft out of it. But eventually all the mating nukes get full, and they don't have mated queens that have come back to them. So that's when we have to start using a virgin bank and waiting a week for the virgins, and by that time, beginning to have queens come back mated into the mating nukes. And when we use 2-day cells, let the mating nuke finish it. When we use that, we have about a 70% average on getting a mated queen back to the mating nuke. Sometimes it's 90, sometimes it's 50. It averages out to about a 70% return rate on queens coming back mated. And it's usually all about weather. Wind, little rain showers that pop up, the queen's out flying, she don't come back. With the virgins, the 7-day virgins, I put them in the mornings, and that they usually go in on a Tuesday morning. And when they go in the morning, they'll take a mating flight that day, that afternoon. And the reason I know that is because if I go back on a Thursday, there's already eggs there. It's quick, real quick.
But this is really a commercial technique, right? You're doing all this to be able to get lots of queens.
Lots of queens, quick, and make sure that they come back. I mean, that's a 7-day virgin thing, making sure that they are more likely to come back, because I don't put them in on a day like yesterday. I'll put them in on a day like today. And they got good weather to fly in, and they're more likely to come back. But I mean, that's why I was saying earlier, if you have 20 hives and you want 30 queens, a double screen or a cloak board is the way to go.
And can we talk more about that strategy? Because that's, well, selfishly, that's what I would be interested in, because I'm not trying to make 200 queens a year, you know. So how does a cloak
We
board
we need about 3,000 queens a year. So that's why we do this.
But I'm interested to hear, for a smaller scale person, how would you use a cloak board or a double screen board to
Well,
make queens?
That is so simple. I mean, it's basically just a walk-away split that's vertical.
Okay.
You're not even having to look for the queen. You make sure that top box and bottom box both have eggs, larvae, pupa, bees, food.
Okay.
Don't even care where the queen is, but they need both hives need all of that. And with a double screen, you physically move it if you need to, and you put the double screen on
In between the two boxes.
in between the two boxes. It'll have an opening, and you put the opening so the top box can exit on the rear of the hive, at the rear of the hive instead of at the front.
Facing opposite directions.
Yep, facing opposite directions. Whichever one does not have a queen will make one.
Okay. Will they make a good queen? It'll be with like swarm-like cells, or
you're going to have some emergency cells, but that's where the maintenance comes in. You have to go into that in 5 days. Go into that, and any cell that's capped at the end, in 5 days, any cell that's capped, destroy it.
Destroy it.
The uncapped queen cells will be made from younger larvae, and keep them, and go back in about 4 days later. Don't wait 10 days, but go back in 4 days later and cut the queen cells out that you don't need. Don't leave more than one good queen cell in there.
Because they'll do cast swarms, or
Yeah.
Okay.
you'll have virgin swarm come out of it.
Okay.
And you're still at the mercy of the queen coming back from a mating flight.
Right.
One of the good points of either a cloak board or a double screen is that if the queen does not come back, you just take it out and
Recombine
let
the colony back together.
all you do is just take it out and let them run together. That does two things. If you're doing that in the spring, you either get a queen and you can make your split, do whatever you want to with the queen, or you don't get a queen, but you've allowed the hive to do what nature tells it needs to do at that time of year. Nature tells the bees that you need to reproduce this colony, and that's a swarm, and you've allowed them to do what it fulfills their natural instinct. So you're a lot less likely to have a swarm when you do that.
So if the top box gets a mated queen to successfully come back, now you have 2 queen-right colonies separated by a double screen
Yep.
board. You just make a split. You just move the top
You-
box
you-
and
It's your choice.
Yeah.
You know, you can make a split, move the top box to its own bottom board.
Yep.
Or you can pull the queen out, do whatever you want to with the
with the mated
queen.
queen, yeah,
Yeah.
recombine the 2 boxes back together.
And recombine them, put honey supers on them,
Yep.
and you have the advantage of a 2 queen hive without having 2 queens in there. Or there was a fellow that used to be a professor at Michigan State University, and he ran the bee yard at Michigan State. He was he was a bee expert, and he ran all 2 queen colonies, never used an excluder. He would start the 2 queen colony just like I just described, remove the double screen and put honey supers on.
Just leave them.
Just
How
leave
tall
them.
were they? I know they get tall for tomorrow.
Oh, he would have 10 deeps on some of them. I mean, they were monsters.
He had young backs.
Well, he was a professor. He had undergrads doing that. You know.
The 2 queens won't. They'll coexist.
You know, we read all the books that say that 2 queens won't coexist in a hive. You'll never have more than 1 queen in a hive.
They will.
No, they will. And once in a while, they don't. And that's what the guys that wrote those books saw. Once in a while, they don't. When they don't, so what? You still got
You still
one
got
queen.
one queen.
But most of the time, 2 queens coexist. I've even seen 2 queens laying on the same frame, on the same side of the frame at the same time. So
Wow.
they're not going to war with one another every single time. It's
Mother-daughter, is that how it is?
probably mother-daughter. Yep.
You said smash the capped cells because those would be made from an emergency
Yep.
larva, correct?
Yep.
The ones that are still open were made from a 1 or 2 day old larva.
Yep.
And that'll be a better queen.
That'll be a better queen. Yes, it will.
And then you come back 4 days later and harvest those queens.
Yep.
Right? What's the best way to cut a queen cup out?
With a pocket knife.
Pocket knife. Okay.
When you was cutting those out the other day, was you putting them in just like the little containers?
Yeah. I was putting them in cell protectors. Is what I was putting them in, and that there's probably still one laying in the floor over here. I was looking for them. They scattered all over the floor. So. Right. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see one right here.
There's another one over here between the 2 buckets here.
This was a cell protector. That's what you put queen cells in that you're cutting out, and it's also what you put queen cells in when you're going to install it in a hive that you think they might possibly chew it up.
Yeah, I've had a few of those happen.
You put a couple of them in something like that with the little caps or whatever.
Yeah, I did.
Is that something you can put like in that has a queen extruder?
Yep, putting queen cells in these. If you had to store those queen cells, expecting them to emerge, you put them in this and put it over a queenless hive, and virgins would emerge, and you would preserve the virgin without losing her in the virgin swarm, and be able to use her later.
Now, is there a spot to put like a little drop of honey or something in there for when she emerges? Or
No,
the
bees will take care of her.
Okay.
Yeah, but then that's the whole purpose of
Yeah.
using those in a virgin bank, is you're letting the bees take care of them so that you don't have to be there every minute. Hoping that you're there within 10 minutes when they emerge.
Yeah, I've had some hatch out in an incubator and had to do the honey, so
Right.
I'm not sure if they had to do that too.
I helped a group one time in Mississippi that I helped train some guys about grafting, making cell builders, and all that. They wanted to start keeping queens in an incubator and queen cells in an incubator. And these weren't developed then. We were using hair roller cages, or they were. This was all their thing. I was saying put them in a queenless hive, and they were like, "Nah, we got too many of them. We don't want to have to be going through all those bees." So they set up a bunch, like 6 chicken incubators. Had the temperature exactly right. Kept a water bowl in there, and the little fan on the incubator would keep air moving in there, and keep the humidity right. And I mean, they had it going on. They did a great job, but somebody had to be checking on them about every 15 minutes. When they knew about when they were going to emerge, but they had it set up where that there was a group emerging every day of the week. So somebody had to be there about every 15 minutes to make sure that queen had something to eat when she got out of the cell. And it's more about water than it is food. They have food in the bottom of the cell that'll be left. It's more about water. But somebody was there, and I can't say anything bad about what they were doing because it was really working for them. And then they all went crazy. It's funny how money does that to people.
Yeah. How many cycles do you get through your cell builders?
I usually get about 6 to 8 weeks out of a cell builder, and that's
Adding brood?
I don't ever add any brood.
Okay.
That's because of the capped brood that I put in there.
That buys you time.
That buys you a little bit of time. You can keep adding brood to it, but if you add brood to it, add capped brood.
Right.
Because if you add larva, there's always that chance that they'll make a wild cell out of that larva and they'll ignore your graft.
Yeah.
And I know other guys that, in fact, guys in Mississippi that help me, sometimes they just shake bees off into it. They'll shake a package and just dump the package off into there, and it works. That all you're looking for is overpopulating the hive, but it has to be young bees. You don't want to overpopulate it with foragers. The young bees will become foragers. The foragers will never become a young bee. Their glands are done, and they're not going to revert back to feeding larvae or making wax. Now, you can tell within a week of when the bees stop wanting to make queens and start deciding it's time to get ready for winter. And that usually happens sometime between third or fourth week of July and the second week of August. And the way that you can tell, you'll have a cell builder that should be working. I mean, the last graft, great. Big long cells, bright colored wax. The very next graft, the cells will be a little bit shorter and the wax will be dark. And the switch is flipped. They're not going to be as good at making queens for any cell builder. It's not going to be as good at making queens the rest of the season because they have stopped being in the production mode and started being in the survival mode. And the reason it's darker wax, the bees aren't producing that wax anymore. They're robbing it. That's right. They're robbing it from somewhere else. And it's pretty easy to see. When I start seeing dark cells or smaller cells, I don't mind a smaller cell if it's bright wax. But if it's dark cell, dark comb, and smaller cells, I just stop trying to raise queens.
So would you do it all summer long then? From now through August?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And keep a bunch of nukes.
That's what I'm planning on doing. We're grafting next weekend. So.
Yeah. Well, keep a bunch of nukes and start those nukes as mating nukes and let them grow out. And as they get, you got a 5-frame nuke. When it starts building on the 5th frame, take a couple of frames out of it and add to either make more nukes or add to a doggy hive, and make a big difference. And a lot of times the reason a queen appears to be a poor queen is because there's not enough nurse bees in there. And she may be laying a good pattern, but they're cannibalizing most of the eggs because there's just not enough nurse bees to take care of them. So don't give up on the queen just because it appears like she's not doing her job. And when you add those couple of frames of bees into a hive, next time you look, you think, wow, what happened to this queen? She's really bumped up production here.
You're
But-
equalizing with captive brood, right?
Yeah.
So that when they emerge, they.
Yeah. And, keep those nukes going. You got a mated queen there for when you do have a queen failure. You got a fix for it. Or if you have a hive that something goes wrong with, you've got a fix for it. And it's having a yard full of nukes is a great tool for being able to fix problems that you have in a bee yard.
So let's say you don't have any nuke boxes.
Yeah.
And you're grafting next weekend. When would you start on those boxes?
Now.
Make you can take a 10-frame box and make a nuke box with it just by blocking off
Right.
either side of the entrance, or that they can't access the rest of the hive. The whole key to that, to getting that overcrowded situation, is either more bees in a 10-frame box or reduce the 10-frame box to 4 or 5 frames, and same number of bees, and you're just compressing them, kind of. You can do it either way, and works fine. I mean, it works good. Just don't let them get into the other side.
Right. Well, that's the nice thing about doing that too, is that you can reuse that box for
Exactly. You
something
can
else.
repurpose it. Yeah.
Instead of just having nuke boxes that are dedicated to that.
Yeah. I have some wooden nuke boxes, but most of my wood boxes are these portable plastic things.
Mm-hmm.
The pro nukes are okay until it gets really hot weather. Then they're not so okay. Gesture nukes they give you a little bit more life in hot weather and a lot more life in cool weather, because they got that corrugated plastic, the air gap in there gives you some degree of insulation in it. So they're better. They're my choice for keeping from one year to the next. But
Which one's the jester?
gestures, yeah. The pro nukes are great, and queens will come back to those at the same rate as they come back anywhere else. But in hot weather, you'll melt the wax off the frames.
Because they're plastic and there's no insulation?
Yeah, and a gesture nuke, you can do the same thing. If it's sitting out in the sun, it's 95 degrees, you can do the same thing. I came up out here one day a few years ago, and there's a big swarm. I thought it was a swarm hanging on a limb. I thought, wow, this is odd to have a big swarm like that on a limb. And I thought, I wonder where it came from. Well, I saw a nuke box that I had there that I had been using for a cell builder, and the last round of cells, I'd quit raising queens at that time. It was in August, and I just let it raise its own queen in there with the last cell. And I saw a bee flying out of it, and I thought, wonder if my old cell builder swarmed. And I looked in there; they didn't swarm; they absconded.
Yeah.
And for a split second, I thought, wonder why they did that. And then the next millisecond, I saw liquid wax on top of the frames. And I thought, well, heck, I wouldn't have stayed in there either, But yeah, I mean, you can literally melt the wax out of those nuke boxes in 95 degrees sun.
So do you keep your jesters in the shade a little bit? Or?
Yeah, I keep them in at least afternoon shade.
Afternoon shade.
At least, yeah. And when I have had fields full of them before, especially in South Mississippi, and I would take burlap and just drape burlap over the top of them. Work fine. Anything to keep that sunlight from
Beating
going
on
through
it, yeah.
going through that white cover. You wouldn't think that would let light in there and heat the hive, but it does.
The
Enough to melt the wax.
those Pro Nukes are perfect pollen feeders. I'll take the
Oh yeah, that's what I use.
I take the yellow ends off of them and
I
put
do
a
too.
pollen sub in there, and I'll put a brick on top of the lid, and the bees will just tear up pollen.
But I
there.
set one on a 55-gallon drum out here by one of Valerie's chicken pens and I know when I need to do that when she comes in fussing about the chickens can't eat your chicken feed because the bees are all in it. And I know that I need, and usually that's what she said. You need to set your pollen up out there. And I do, and it's amazing how fast they'll find that.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to lure the bees to it.
Right.
When they need it, anything a honeybee needs, it's going to find.
And I set them right in the apiary because it won't set off robbing.
No, it won't.
Yeah.
Honeybees don't rob pollen.
Yeah.
The bees that do the robbing are the foragers that forage for nectar. They're not the foragers that forage for pollen. Bees don't, they never attempt to rob solid food because the nectar foragers don't know what to do with it. And the pollen foragers aren't stimulated to try to rob it. So this winter patty that we make to put on hives in the winter, if we have a small hive that has to be fed in the summertime, I know that because I've done it before, I know that if I feed that hive liquid feed, the big hives will rob it to death. They'll kill it. But I can put that sugar patty on them, and they don't get robbed, and they survive. They live. So a sugar patty is not just for winter. It's for small hives in the summer that you don't want to get robbed to death. So, little things that you learn from making terrible mistakes. And I survived the mistake, but that hive didn't.
Just so you know it. 11:30.
Yeah, it's going to take us about 30 minutes to make a cell builder.
Also, put that on purpose.
All right.
Yeah, because that'll give us over lunchtime for the bees to come up into the top of the cell builder.